Called you here as members of parliament, mostly young parliamentarians, young by age, young by heart for myself. We have the member of parliament for Nabulindo has disappeared, but we have with us here the member of parliament for Nyando, Jared Okello. You have Honorable Mwenje for Embakasi West. You have Babu Owino for Embakasi East, and we have our specially elected member of parliament, Rene. My name is Anthony Loch, member of parliament for Madare. We have this continuing dialogue that has been going on around the country, and which as young parliamentarians we support. The dialogue is ongoing under the National Dialogue Committee, and even though they had closed their public hearings, we did present a memorandum today which was received at the Bomas of Kenya, which raises certain salient issues, and each of us is going to speak to each of these separately. I will begin with the issue about criminalizing the criminal justice system and weaponizing the institution of the DCI and the police in carrying out arrests, especially as was witnessed during the demonstrations. These not only affected the rank and file of ordinary Kenyans and supporters who are exercising their rights under Article 37, it also affected the members of parliament who represent these very Kenyans who are on the streets demonstrating about the cost of living. I was arrested myself, Honorable Babu was arrested, Honorable Jared Okello, having been a 100-meter sprinter, disappeared from Nyando to Honorable Osotzi's place. And the tale is not as funny as it sounds, which is the reason that we have approached the National Dialogue Committee, so that we find a mechanism of raising the criminal justice system above the government of the day, which wants to criminalize and to weaponize. Now, one of the things that we want dealt with by the Dialogue Committee is to ensure that whenever it is that arrests are carried out by the criminal justice system, if they are carried out, the Constitution must be adhered to. Under Article 47 and Article 49, their rights of arrested persons, their rights to an advocate, their rights to access to medical care, their rights to representation, which invariably in all the circumstances of the arrest were not done. You're entitled to be presented in court within 24 hours of your being arrested. There is under Article 43 of the Constitution that says that every Kenyan citizen is entitled to emergency medical assistance. I will give myself as an example, and Babu here will also elaborate, that I was arrested on a Thursday at about 5 p.m. and for 19 hours held incommunicado, without food, without medicine, denied advocate, denied the ability to be visited by a family. When you speak about any person who is predisposed to a medical condition, whether it is asthma, whether it is hypertension, whether it is diabetes or any other condition, that is a person who under Article 43 of the Constitution is entitled to medical emergency. When Babu Owino was arrested, the court ordered that he was unwell and needed emergency medical care. Instead of him being taken to the hospital, he was promptly whisked and taken to a cell. Held there for a period of 5 days, myself for 5, close to 6 days, presented to court in breach of the Constitution. So this dialogue committee, because the dialogue arose out of the circumstances of the demonstrations and the arrest of ordinary Kenyans, we must ask them to do certain minimum things. One, to take an audit of all the cases of our people who were arrested and detained, and some of them have cases in police stations and some of them have cases in the courts. Those cases, an audit must be taken, and they must be withdrawn unconditionally, and a system of compensation for those who suffered death and injury must be done. But also importantly, members of parliament, they occupy and represent their citizen and exercise the sovereignty of these people under Article 1 of the Constitution. When you arrest these people as if you're arresting tag a common criminal or a murderer, there must be systems in which the institution of parliament can be respected and summons issued through the Speaker of the National Assembly, a notice given to you so that you're able to present yourself, a reminder, and then thereafter, if you don't present yourself, then you can be arrested. In summary, on this particular issue, if an arrest takes place on a Friday, this dialogue committee must find a way of requiring that the judiciary opens the courts up to midnight with the registry open so that you're able to process bail and to present yourself in court on Monday. So those are our representations on the issue of the rule of law and the criminal justice system and the requirement not to weaponize arrest. So I will ask the Honorable Jared Okello to address the issue of inclusivity and appointments in the public service and other sectors of the public.
Ladies and gentlemen, as Azimio, we would want to pursue a constitutional amendment that makes it mandatory for no single community to hold more than 30% of jobs within government. We, in the interim, will be asking for a complete audit of representation of tribes within the Kenya Defense Forces, including the police, the executive, parastatals, and every government agency. Of late, you have heard about the shareholding within government, one side of the government pulling a different direction, some saying that is primitive and backward, of course referring to a section within government, but some are continuing with the same narrative that the shareholders are those who cast their ballots in favor of Kenya Kwanza. So we will be pushing for a mandatory audit to be done by PricewaterhouseCoopers and NCIC in collaboration, and that report on tribal representation within government must be forwarded to Parliament with recommendations on how to rectify or remedy the situation. If the findings of Pricewaterhouse, together with NCIC, which we recommend to be the two bodies that will be carrying out a comprehensive audit on tribal representation within Parliament, shall find out that 60% of jobs are held by Kikuyus and Kalenjins, then we may have to recommend freezing appointments going forward to these communities until we reach what we call equality or equity within distribution of those jobs. However, we shall be giving powers to these two entities to be able to come up with remedial measures to address this impasse without necessarily, as members of Parliament, giving them what they need to do.
Any other question? Did you have a question?
And I want to talk about Article 115, which is on presidential assent and referral. Now, under this article, whenever Parliament passes a bill and it is referred to the President, there is a provision under this article that states that when the President makes some amendments, he refers the same back to Parliament, and if Parliament cannot raise 2/3 to make amendments, then that means the recommendations that the President has passed become law by itself. So one of the issues that we have here is if we are talking about separation of powers between the executive and the legislature, this article gives the President or gives the executive authority to legislate on behalf of Parliament. Thereby, this is unconstitutional, and we need an amendment to this issue so that we can ensure that whatever Parliament passes, then if the President decides and brings recommendations, then it is him, it is the office of the executive that should raise the 2/3. The obligation should not be upon us to raise 2/3 so that we can reject his recommendations, which, as you all know, 2/3 is the threshold for amending the Constitution. So that's a number that is quite high, even for the government side itself to raise. So this is an amendment that we need to make to ensure that Parliament remains independent, can legislate on matters that it deems fit, because we are the elected representatives. The issue of separation of powers must be maintained, and this is not an issue that we're even just discussing for the sake of this new government, but it is an issue that has been exploited even in previous governments. So it is a concern for us, and we think this is the right time to make an amendment on this Article 115. Thank you.
Okay, Babu. One of the issues that has been before the dialogue committee has been on our institution of political parties, and it has been addressed on the basis of the provisions of sections 14 of the Political Parties Act, where people are elected from one platform and after election cross over to the other platform. That is one aspect that has been addressed on the invasion of the institution of political parties as the key driver of the governance in our country. However, there is something else that needs to be addressed here, which when you read it together with the raid on political parties, then you realize that there is an attempt to totally kill our institutions of governance and especially political parties. Sections 25 of the Political Parties Act require that no less than 0.03% of monies that are collected are allocated to political parties. Now, these are supposed to be program-based. They are supposed to be allocations given to political parties based on requirements of the Constitution under Article 38, which guarantees every Kenyan the right to participate and to belong to a political party, to recruit, to campaign, to support an ideology. When you look at the provisions of Articles 90, 96, 97, 177, it is political parties that are the instruments given the power to nominate and to present party lists to the IEBC so that those people end up being members of parliament. It is through political parties that the entire executive, both elected and those who are appointed, arrive at those positions. In fact, if you look at it indirectly, even the judiciary is a product of the political party system, because the president, at the tail end of appointment of judges, appends his signature. So the institution of political parties crafted under the Constitution 2010 is at the very center of our democracy. When you refuse to fund them, or to underfund them, or to fund them on the basis of what you're saying, money that is available as opposed to money based on their programs, you are actually killing these political parties. So this is a conspiracy by the executive and by the treasury, which when you look at alongside the idea that political party memberships are being raided, then there is a systematic attempt to return us to the days of multipartism. In 2018, the Court of Appeal passed a decision that says that all the arrears owed to political parties, which was close to about 4 billion for the Orange Democratic Party and some other amounts to other political parties, were supposed to be paid. Those arrears are still due and owing from 2011 to date. The government, the national government of Uhuru Kenyatta, which was called the handshake government, made an attempt from 2019 to 2020 to begin paying these arrears. There is something called administrative continuity. Because there is a decision of the court, and because the decision was directed at the National Assembly, and this government and this executive and their leadership in parliament have refused to obey these orders, we are now approaching the National Dialogue Committee to find a way of ring-fencing this money so that it is a fast charge upon the consolidated funds, so that we don't end up killing the very institution that is responsible for the leaders that are seated here, the leaders that are seated in the executive, and even those in the judiciary. So those are our statements today, ladies and gentlemen, unless you have one or two questions.
Including to the fact that now we are having young people running towards drug use, including the recently one that we talked about, which is called Velo. Now, one of the things that we need to be very cognizant of is that as a nation, we should be addressing this issue. Number two, we have a penal code that criminalizes attempted suicide. What we should be doing is actually looking at what are these issues that are causing suicide. Because every day, especially in the local news, we have a lot of news out there about children attempting suicide. We have situations where in our schools, guidance and counseling is optional, so students do not even know that they can actually go and access this. And I've been very vocal about advocating for actually having guidance and counseling being included in schools in the curriculum, the same way PE is part of the timetable, so that this becomes something that children go for. And the other thing also is that as a nation, yesterday was a mental health and wellness day, which coincided with Utamaduni Day. But we did not hear the government, neither the Ministry of Health, anybody talk about mental health. And yet this is a very big issue in this country. It's actually a national shame that in this day and age, we can have people in our country losing their lives, committing suicide because of mental health issues, because nobody wants to talk about it. People assume that when you have mental health issues, it means wewe ni mwenda wazimu. That's not the case. And some people are not even able to speak about it. Let's begin with that, because they don't know that it's actually an issue. We have, and again back to the dialogue committee that is going on, we had a lot of victims of police brutality. We have not heard anyone talking about those who are injured or the families that lost their loved ones. Nobody has gone out to say that these people actually need guidance and counseling, because they end up having mental issues. People are going crazy out of there, not only because of the cost of living, but also because they don't have money. People are losing their loved ones. We have mental issues in this country because in some institutions like KRA, this government has decided only 80% of the new employees goes to 2 tribes in this country. Those are just examples of issues that people are dealing with. They're dealing with issues of wondering, does it mean that if I come from a different community, then I am a lesser person than everyone else? Does it mean that because I am not a shareholder, as they so say, in this country, as has been said by the deputy president, then it means that I don't belong to this country? Does it mean when we are having tribal clashes and ethnic cleansing in different areas of this country, that you're not a member of this country? And so mental health is not just about, as I said, people who, so to speak, say people who have gone crazy or people who are suffering from bipolar, but it's something that builds up in people. And so we want that this government actually take it into cognizance that mental health is an issue that needs to be